and welcome to another evening of frank conversation here on Hard Copy. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf. On Friday last week, the United Nations and the European Union raised an alarm over the humanitarian situation in the northeast, which they say is not improving. According to them, thousands of internally displaced persons who had earlier returned to their homes are coming back to the camps over fears of attacks by the insurgents. This was how they put it.
Over the past year, 180,000 civilians have been forced to leave everything behind in search of safety and basic services, some of them for the second or third time.
All sides and all those involved are obliged under international humanitarian law to allow access by the affected populations to the humanitarian assistance that they need. The need to ensure security and safety of humanitarian workers. Regrettably, recently they have become targets, which is completely, totally unacceptable under international humanitarian law.
Well, Nigeria has now fought the war on insurgency for about 10 years. In the face of the concerns and recommendations by the donor bodies, which we cannot ignore, what is the way forward? Tonight on Hard Copy, we speak with Dr. Mairo Mandara, who is a Special Advisor and Coordinator, Sustainable Development Partnership and Humanitarian Support with the Borno State Government. Before joining the government, Dr. Mandara was the Country Director of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in Nigeria. Dr. Mairo Mandara, welcome to Hard Copy.
Thank you very much for having me, Mote.
Well, I don't know how this press briefing hit you. It seemed pretty serious when they did that brief, and we also know that the EU and the United Nations representatives met with the president right after that press briefing. You are right at the heart of the issues that they have raised. How did it hit you?
Being part of the people living in Borno State and actually being in the center of the insurgency and the impact of this insurgency, for us it's a daily business. We live with the people impacted. We are impacted because the people we work with, the people we serve, are impacted. So hearing that from the international community is actually re-emphasizing what we know. So it was not new. It's something we know. It's something we live. In fact, it's something the governor breathes. He goes to the IDP camp at 12:31 a.m. So it's something that we know for sure. So what hits me is the fact that the international community have now acknowledged that, yes, we have serious problems. And so therefore, and for me, what is also important is the fact that we have this problem in the northeast, in Borno, in a shrunken global community. It means that we have this problem in Nigeria, and we have this problem in West Africa, we have this problem in Africa. And
are you talking about the problem of insurgency?
The problem of insurgency and the impact of the problems of insurgency. All of it. Okay. All of it. You cannot divulge one from the other.
So the problem right now, I mean, the issue right now, the insurgency has always been there. I think for a number of people, they had thought that we were making progress in battling back the insurgents, in taking back our territory, in reclaiming local governments and helping our people resettle in these places. But when we begin to hear that, oh, it would seem that the insurgents are beginning to come back, and those who had hitherto gone back home are coming back to the camps. There are huge questions to be asked as to, are we really making progress?
In my opinion, we are making progress. Are we making progress as much as we should? No. Restricting people in the camp and keeping them almost semi-hostages will not work. Yeah, and that's why the Borno State Governor has taken a position. We will close up all the camps in Maiduguri. We will get people money to rent houses. Once you give people money to rent houses, you give them food for 3 months. What you need to do is to give them capital to be able to feed themselves thereafter.
Yeah, but you have said that the people themselves are leaving the camp. They're not happy staying there. They want to go back home. But if their homes are not safe enough for them to go to, aren't there fears that the progress and the investment that the state government is willing to pour into ensuring that people are able to get their lives back, wouldn't it be a waste?
The areas, the villages out in the, particularly in northern Borno, around the Sambisa area, where it's not safe. But there's a whole lot of areas that are safe in Borno. So we are trying to reset, or we're resettling people in places where they're safe. It may not be your great-grandfather's village, it may not be your village, but it will certainly be in a place where people speak the same language with you. People eat the same food. You're the same community. You're the same tribe. What we're saying is that people should be resettled there to begin to pick up their lives. When we look at insurgency in Borno State, when we look at the humanitarian crisis in Borno State, it's incomplete if we look at insurgency, humanitarian crisis. We have to look at the whole gamut. We have to look at certain areas are unsafe, certain areas are in a stabilization mode, and certainly certain areas are in the development mode. Even as of now, as I'm talking to you, we're discussing with investors. There are opportunities for investment. There's waste management, the renewable energy industry, the agriculture industry. We used to be the second largest producers of fish in this country. So why don't we open up the fish market where it is safe? So that even if we do not do 100% of what we were doing, at least we're able to do 10, 20%. That's a big step. So for me, until we're able to open up economic activities, and there are lots of young, ingenious people want to go back. So we need to let them be.
I want to share your optimism, to be very honest, but I want to also look at, when you look at the humanitarian figures, you know, one is tempted to say, can we really be optimistic? Let's look at the figures from the UNOCHA, which estimates that about 7.1 million people are in urgent need of life-saving humanitarian assistance. I think that's for the entire Northeast region. And those are the figures for 2019. They say they have about 1.8 million people displaced, with the biggest burden being in Borno alone. And now it would seem that humanitarian efforts are being threatened by the constant attacks on aid workers, which is one of the concerns that the international body raised. How optimistic are you, or should I say, how concerned are you that some of the progress that has been made, especially in the area of health, will not be rolled back?
Now, in the area of health, and if you look at the figure 7.1 million, Borno State has about 6.5 million people. It's not just about Boko Haram. Actually, it's also about development indicators. It's about people who are living in secure places but are not having economic wherewithal to be able to eat what they need to eat, to be able to have the life things that they need for their own welfare and for their own development. In fact, how concerned am I? That's why I left what I'm doing and moved back to Borno, because we all need to have all our hands on deck to be able to help in whatever expertise area we have. And that's why we're making this drive to make sure that, I mean, anybody who has something to help with, please come and let's help. And the bottom line, why you see this figure very high, is not all the figure of people affected by Boko Haram. A lot of it is social inequity. There's a massive social inequity, and it's not just in the Northeast. It's the whole of this country. Our wealth, our GDP is very high, but what percentage of people live below $1.25 a day? It's shameful. When you compound that with the impact of insurgency, you compound that further with climate change and the rapid desertification we have in the Northeast. When you put all of that, and you also confine people to just simply that area where this thing is highest, what do you expect? Increase in poor health indicators, low education level. So for me, just fighting the Boko Haram is not good enough. We need to ensure social justice. We need to ensure social equity. We need to ensure that people are free to engage in trade. We need to also make sure that everybody does their due. The biggest bearers of all this burden are women and children. So what is our level of girls' education? How do we ensure girls are better educated, women are better educated? And quite frankly, I'll tell you, Mope, that some of these things beyond Boko Haram, we the elites also need to look hard into ourselves and see what are we doing to actually perpetuate this. What are we doing? We had farmers that were doing their job. Now suddenly, a farmer's job is being taken. The herders cannot rear their animals. What are we doing? And I think if we think just Boko Haram is the cause of all of this, no, we're wrong. It has to do with a lot of our social behavior.
Well, I know that I have seen a video on your timeline on Twitter, which was, I don't know, almost promoting, because you said a lot of your friends were asking what life was like when you returned to Borno, and you tried to show them a video that it would seem that, well, it almost seems like life is back to normal. In Borno, there's a lot of activity, especially in Maiduguri. But the question is, what level of normal would you think that the people of Borno in general and in Maiduguri in particular expect to return to, when you also consider the fact that in recent times we've been hearing cases of, suicide bombings, which, are not few and far between, but still happen nonetheless?
The Twitter was answering questions from my friends who think Borno is some desert area where you have skeletons all over the place, with snakes roaming around and hyena eating pieces of flesh and stuff. So I said to them, no, Borno is actually, and particularly my Lagosian friends, telling them that, you know what, in Borno there's active life in Maiduguri. How do we expand that active life is what we stand for as a government. How do we activate that active life? And also make sure that people also feel that they have a stake in doing that. Yes, you go out to the hinterland, particularly you go to northern Borno. It's pathetic because northern Borno is the area most hit by not only the insurgency, that's where you have desert encroachment, that's where you have climate change, that's where you have a lot of really a poor rainfall, that's where you have nature and man conspiring to make life difficult. These areas are difficult, but you know what, they're Nigerians. So for me, rather than lament, my attitude is, what is my responsibility? What is our responsibility? How can we change some of this? A lot of us have disaggregated how we work within the state. There's some that are focused on humanitarian, that are every day trying to think of how do we arrest this emergency? How do we make sure things happen? The governor is in there. He leads that. He's trying to make sure everybody that wakes up is as comfortable as he is. There are also some of us who choose to look at long-term things. Yes, this is where we find ourselves today. And the governor is also our leader. So the guy, I don't know how many pieces he has, but he has several pieces of him. So in the block I belong, in the block I'm choosing to work, it's like, yes, we do have our situation today. Yes, this is where we are. Yes, we have so many people that are not feeding, that are not, that are afraid, that things are really bad, as you say, but we choose not to be bound by that.
The question is, in the future that you plan,
Yep.
what level of normal do you think the people of Maiduguri can return to? Do you think, or even Borno, do you think that they can go back to the levels where they were before the insurgency came?
No, that's an underdream. We do not dream that people in Borno go back to the level of they had prior to insurgency. We want people to go back to a place where they never dreamt they would ever be. So our 25-year development plan is set in such a way that the trajectory is much better than if we had had a normal life in the last 10 years. So for me, we would have failed if after the insurgency we go back to a Borno we had. We should have a Borno we dream of. Look at countries like Rwanda. Look at Korea. Korea went through wars, and look at what it is now. It is a developing country. What did it take? It took tenacity of the people and the singular decision that the people said, enough is enough, and we will move forward. So for me, dreaming to be Borno before insurgency, that's no dream. It's a much better dream, Borno.
Well, let's talk about before we go to health and the investments in education, I want to quickly talk about a political solution. One of the things that the international partners talked about is the government finding a political solution to the crisis. There have been talks of amnesty. It was seen that that is going on unofficially. The military have been talking about rehabilitating Boko Haram terrorists. In fact, I think there's a place they keep them in Niger State, and they invite the media from time to time to come and see just how much progress this former insurgents are making. The question is on the question of trust. Whether the people who, before now, identified these people as Boko Haram terrorists, do you think that they will ever be able to accept them back into society as now, their brothers and sisters?
Thank you. I think this is hitting the nail on the head. This is one of the challenges we're really trying to work around and understand. We're now currently looking at studies, or we're studying what happened in other countries. And if you look at it as a human being, somebody that has killed your father or your mother, and suddenly you come face to face with them, the initial, the human reaction is our revenge. How did other countries do it? How did Rwanda deal with it after the genocide? How did Pakistan address this? How did this take place in some of the other countries? How did it take place in South America? How did these countries do that? So these are some of the things that we're truly trying to understand. We're looking at what model works. In fact, when models work, are they similar to our sociocultural background? Does it make sense to us? So these are the things that we're working with the Northeast Development Commission to look at. How do we really resettle these people? That's one. The second, I think we also have to reframe the language because quite a number of the people that have been brought back to be rehabilitated were actually coerced. There were people who were abducted by Boko Haram. So they were victims of Boko Haram. And now they're victims of society. So they're a double victim group. So we need to differentiate when we talk about them from those victims that were abducted and were actually made slaves. Some of them had not killed anybody, but they were confined because they were slaves. Some were used as cook. Some women were used as sex slaves. These are people that were rescued. We need, as people, to have compassion on these people, because these people really, it's one thing to get them to go even through the fact that they had lived this life, but to come back to their family, even when the families know they were abducted, and to be labeled. So the way we call them is very, very important. And I think, honestly, the media has a big role to play.
What name are you proposing they be called?
There are some that are victims. So if you can differentiate the chaff from the grain, those that are truly, truly victims that we should all come and embrace and support to help them get back to their normal. And then there are those that are repentant, who are a different category of people, but the majority are the victims. And quite frankly, and I being a Muslim, I think also we need to get our Muslim religious leaders to take up their responsibility, because it is their responsibility. If there's a misunderstanding of the religion, it means that they're also not doing something right. They're not actually teaching people the responsibility.
Let's come to the issue of health. You're a great advocate for, health, especially women and children's health. You're a doctor. You've also identified education as one of the indicators that makes the difference with indexes like child and maternal mortality. And now the Borno State Government is investing a lot, especially in the education of the girl child. When are you hoping that some of these investments will yield fruit? And do you ever fear that they could, the gains, the projected gains could be rolled back?
There's no way of, so if there's any one investment that you never ever lose, there's always a dividend. I don't know what investors and economists call it. It doesn't plumber down. It's actually investments on girls' education. At the very minimum, I mean, the data across Africa has shown that completion of secondary school for girls significantly is when you have the first leapfrog in improvement in maternal health, child health, and a lot of things, income, in fact, self-determination and decision-making. And that is realizing your humanness, that you're principally a human being. So for me, each year we keep a girl in school, you're doing a number of things. One, you're ensuring she's getting some level of education. As an obstetrician gynecologist, I know what it means for a girl to mature before she becomes a mother. And as a mother, I also know why it is important that a woman should be technologically savvy before she starts having children. Because right under your nose, your children will outsmart you and you will not even be able to parent your own children. So for each year of education we invest in, it's probably you'll get 10 times every year in terms of outcome, but also as each year you get a girl going to school. What ultimately, if you project that in the next 10 to 15 years, what you're saying is that the whole lineage of that girl, the whole generation and the generation after generation of that girl are more likely to be educated. I'm sure the way she cooks is also better.
The question is how to convince people to keep their children in school for that long. Do you have a plan for that?
Yes, we do. Now, I must say with all humility that those of us that are educated have gotten education with a bit of arrogance. We think we know everything. We think when we go to communities, we tell them that your children are not educated, you're backward, bring them. And then a government says this, and then you do a policy. These people don't understand your policy. These people don't trust most politicians because they see them once in 4 years. What do they trust? They also have their own government. They have their own informal policy. Who is their government? They're traditional leaders. Try traditional leader telling these people who don't send their children to school to go to school, and you'll see what happens. So for us, we have a very respectful relationship with our traditional leaders. We're getting them to lead, to tell us how to do it. We acknowledge we do not know how to do it. They're telling us how to do it. The religious leaders are the policies of these people. You tell them God has said so, they believe it. You say the politician has said so, they may not believe it, they may clap. So we're asking our traditional and religious leaders to take the lead.
Just quickly, as we wrap up, I'm wondering whether you think that in terms of mental health, psychosocial area of life, do you think that eventually the people of Borno will be able to pull out of this, the mental scar that the insurgency would have inflicted on their lives?
I think to think that people who have gone through this will totally forget it is to actually to not be realistic. People will not forget what they have gone through. But what we're trying to get people to do rather is, what do you make of it? When one is hit with calamity, even the most unfortunate situation has a 0.1% good in it. This is what we find ourselves. What is that small opportunity? How do we interpret it? There are various options. We can hold to it and cry victims and remain victims for the rest of our lives. We can take it and lament and lament and lament and complain, which is a major thing in the country. We can take it, look at it, accept it, and start taking baby steps forward. We can take it, accept it, review it, learn lessons from it, pick up the lessons, and run to catch up where we left off.
Well, I think it's a fine place to leave it. Dr. Mairo Mandara, thank you for coming on Hard Copy.
Thank you, Mope. It's a pleasure.
We do wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's where we draw the curtains tonight. But as always, we want to hear from you. Do write to us using the handles on your screen. Thank you for watching. I'm Maokwe Yusuf. Good night.